If you truly want to understand what affects house prices in one area from another area, then you need to understand the concept that all economic activity ends in the land. Now, in a previous video I talked about how houses depreciate, and we often think of rising house prices as the house as a whole. But actually what you need to do is you need to separate the structure that sits on the land from the land itself. So in this video we're going to talk about the land and how the land value changes. Not because of the economic cycle, that's for another video, but I'm going to talk about what will affect the land value in a given area. This is something that many governments have explored and are interested in and want to put a taxation on the land itself as opposed to properties, because they believe that there's a way to capture the value of the economic activity and infrastructure activity that goes into the land. So let me explain this concept in a little bit more detail. If you imagine that you've got let's say a small village, and let's say there's a larger conurbation over here, and we know that the values in this area is going to be significantly more in the larger city than in this smaller conurbation. But this area here, for some people, is a much more attractive place to live. The only drawback is that they then have to travel here potentially to work. And we call these often commuter villages, and so often when an estate agent will put something on the market, they'll talk about the distance to the larger conurbations. And so trying to make this much more desirable, but it's obviously got a lower value. Now, what happens is a couple of things can change the value of this particular area. And one is within the private sector, and the second is within the public sector. So let's assume that there's a winding country road here, and the government decides that they're going to put in a main link here. Now, I can remember going back to about 2001, I owned a property in a sort of, well, in fact, I'll tell you where it was. It was in Kilmarnock, a place which was about 15 miles, I might be getting the miles wrong, from Glasgow. So it was very much a commuting town to Glasgow. It had quite a treacherous road, and there had been talk about for years about making that up, bringing it up to motorway standard. And they talked about it for about 20 years and it never happened. So in 2001, in fact 2002, when I sold that property, I'd only held that property for about a year and a half. I had made a significant uplift in the property value, and it was because this motorway was now definitely going to go ahead, and that had the effect of rising house prices there. So who had spent the money? Well, you and I had theoretically spent the money because it was our money through the government that went for that infrastructure improvement. But it was essentially, let's not get carried away with the semantics of it. Let's say this is government money, and the government had spent that money, and therefore the people who actually benefited was not the government, but it was actually the landowners or the people who own properties in that particular area. Also, that when buying new land for development, developers would have found that the value of that land had gone up, and they would have to pay more for that land, and consequently that then what drives the apparent rise in house prices, but it's actually the land value that had gone up. And so that's government money. However, let's take a different scenario and imagine that a major employer comes and builds a factory on the outskirts. Well, what that then does is it creates a demand for new housing, and so new housing is then built, and the envelope here becomes slightly larger because they have to support, they have to allow for space for this new factory going in place. Now again, it will be the local authorities that will release land, because they have a thing called a development plan, and it's a line around which they, within an area where they will allow development to take place. However, part of the negotiation is that the councils would want to see jobs being brought to the area, and therefore in that negotiation they would have allowed further land to be released, and so therefore you would then be able to purchase land for new buildings, whether that was to be houses to be rented out or houses to be bought. And so again, that spending goes in to the land value, so that actual land increases in value because of either government spending more money or private individuals spending money and expanding the local economy or making that local area much more attractive. Now, this doesn't need to be a motorway, it could be a railway line. So again, I can think of another place where there are certain villages, and there's actually a railway line that goes past that, and it goes to a larger area, and this is actually Perth in Scotland, and there's a couple of villages along the way here, and then this railway line goes and does actually stop at other villages. Now, if the railway line, if Network Rail were to open up stations in those areas, then those values would go up in value. So it's again the economic impact of decisions of infrastructure. So this is spending on new railway stations, opening up the line, and the economic activity goes into the land, and that improves the land value in those areas. And because the land rises in price, the house prices, the structure sitting on it, even though the house itself may depreciate in value, the actual land goes up in value, so there's an apparent rise in house prices. But again, I keep coming back to it. It's the land that is appreciating in value, it is not the house itself, it's the land underneath it. Now, you can go to many other countries in the world and you'll find that land prices are significantly less there than they are here. Now, for instance, I was looking through clippings, it was an email that was sent to me about different properties around the world. It was castles around the world that you could buy. And I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I'll show you the caption of it with the value on it. But it simply said that you could buy this chateau in France for a very insignificant amount of money. I think it was about 250,000, maybe 150,000 pounds, or somewhere in that region. And that is because the land value is significantly lower. Now, that property you would never build as a structure on that piece of land today. However, that really reinforces the fact that the actual structure has depreciated in value. And in the video that I talked about how houses depreciate, if you take the US model, where they allow for depreciation over 27.5 years to fully depreciate the house, then you get an understanding that houses depreciate, land increases in value. And that's going to be much, and the reason I'm teaching you these concepts is that I'm wanting to work up to really giving you an understanding of why you get movements in the real estate market. And I'm going to talk about in a future video how we have this real estate cycle that lasts that basically goes through 18.4 years, and to know, when you understand this concept, then you'll understand when to expect house price crashes. It was really land price crashes, but we'll talk about it as house price crashes. So you'll get to understand what it is. And what I really want to bring you to is to have this understanding that you can make money in property in every market. But what you fundamentally don't want to be doing is not so much reacting to the market. You should always react to the market, but what you want to do is prepare for that future market. And so that's where I'm taking you on this. I want you to be prepared for the future markets. I'm thinking about the market over the next 10 years, and I am currently preparing for when I see the market crash. And that's quite a few years away yet, but it will crash. and I'm preparing for that so that I'm ready to take advantage of the opportunities that will be available when the market crashes, because there'll be plenty of opportunities and there'll be probably more money to be made in that scenario than there is currently to be made in property, and you could still make a very significant amount of money in property as it is today. And again, that's some of the things that I'm going to teach you. Please stay with me, watch future videos if you have, can't watch future videos, can you? You watch the previous videos that I've done, and if you've got any suggestions for some videos that you'd like to see, then please put that in the comments below. If you've got any suggestions or comments about this video or other videos, then put them in the comments below, and I look forward to engaging with you, and I promise that I will answer any question that you have to the best of my ability. Until the next video, please build and prosper.